Hey nerds, and welcome to ranking each legendary creature from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty all at once. Before we begin, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Also let me know if you like this style of video because this is my first time doing it. Let's begin. Alright, first up is Ao, a 5/4 dragon spirit with flying and vigilance for 3 white. When he dies, you get to choose one, either put 2+1/+1 counters on each creature or vehicle you control, or you get to look at the top 7, put any number of non-land cards with a total mana value of 4 or less from among them onto the battlefield, and the rest on the bottom in any order. I do like these cards, however I don't think that this is a good option for your commander. I'm going to put Ao in the C tier. Unfortunately, he just doesn't do a whole lot by himself. Next up is Atsushi, the Blazing Sky, a 4/4 flying trample dragon spirit for 4. When Atsushi dies, you can either create 3 treasure tokens or exile the top 2 cards of your library until the end of turn, and you may play those cards. This is going to be a combo piece. This with the treasure dragon that doubles the amount of mana you get from treasures, I'm sure will go infinite in some capacity, but as a commander by himself, I'm going to put him in C tier as well. He just doesn't do enough by himself. And next up, we have Goro-Goro, Disciple of Ryusi, a 2/2 Goblin Samurai for 1 and a red. You can either pay a red and give all your creatures haste until end of turn, or pay 5 and create a 5/5 Dragon Spirit token with flying. You can only do that if you control an attacking modified creature. So you gotta put either equipment, auras, or some kind of counters on Goro-Goro, most likely, for you to be able to activate that effect. Honestly, this is probably really good in a Goblin Tribal build, where the ability to give all your dudes haste is going to be strong, and you may be able to activate the create a dragon token ability once or twice, but as a lead singer in a Goblin Tribal build, there's many better options. I am going to list him in the C tier as well. And next up we have Go-Shintai of Ancient Wars, a 2/2 first strike for 2 and a red. At the beginning of your end step, pay 1. When you do, it deals X damage to target player or planeswalker, where X is the number of shrines you control. These are not good as the lead singer of your deck. These 100% belong into a Shrine Tribal build. I say tribal even though Shrine is not a creature type. Go-Shintai of Ancient Wars easily makes the D tier. It just doesn't do enough by itself. Next up we have Go-Shintai of Boundless Vigor, 1 and a green, 1/1 with trample. At the beginning of your end step, pay 1. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on target shrine for each shrine you control. Again, this is not doing a whole lot by itself. Scavenging Ooze would just be strictly better than this. This is going into D tier as well. These just don't do enough by themselves to justify being your commander. Next up is the Black Go-Shintai. This one is of Hidden Cruelty, a 2/2 with Death Touch for 3 and a black. At the beginning of your end step, pay 1. When you do, destroy target creature with toughness X or less, where X is the number of shrines you control. This one is good for sniping utility creatures or mana dorks, so this one should see a bit more play by itself, but even then it's not very good and also gets into D tier. Go-Shintai of Lost Wisdom is your blue Go-Shintai, a 0/4 flyer with, at the beginning of your end step, pay 1. When you do, target player mills X cards, where X is the number of shrines you control. This is the least useful one. Milling 1 to maybe 5 cards a turn is not going to be doing a whole lot for you. It's a flying 0/4, so it can block really well, but besides the amazing artwork on all these things, the Go-Shintais are all going in D tier, which of course includes Go-Shintai of Shared Purpose, a 1/3 with vigilance for 3 and a white. At the beginning of your end step, pay 1. Create a 1/1 colorless spirit token for each shrine you control. This is easily the best one, but still not very good. If you're able to get out a bunch of different shrines, you can make a pretty sizable army. Unfortunately, of course, this should not be your lead singer, so it goes into D tier as well. Finally, moving away from the Go-Shintais, we have Greasefang, Okiba Boss, a 4/3 for 1 white black, a rat pilot with, at the beginning of combat on your turn, you return a vehicle card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste. Return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. White and black vehicles seems like a very fun archetype. you're going to run into a few problems with trying to get vehicles into the graveyard. You can use a lot of village rights effects to sacrifice them after they attack and are still creatures for additional value, or you can try and get some self-mill. Probably Altar of Dementia would be the best option for you there, but it looks like a very fast and aggressive playstyle in white and black, which you tend not to see a whole lot. Greasefang is going into A tier on my list. Next up we have Heiko Yamasaki, the General, a 3/3 with trample for 3 and a red. With whenever a samurai or warrior you control attacks alone, you can cast an artifact card from your graveyard this turn. By itself, not that great. Honestly, I would just rule 0 partner it with the mono white Yamasaki that's also in this set. Both of the cards aren't that good and your playgroup should let you rule 0 them. With that being said, I'm going to put it in a B tier, assuming that you're going to be partnering it with the white Yamasaki in the set. Coming up next is Hidetsugu Devouring Chaos, a 4/4 Ogre Demon for 3 and a black. You can pay a black and sack a creature to scry 2, or you can pay 2 and a red, tap it, and exile the top card of your library, and you can play that card this turn. When you exile a card this way, Hidetsugu deals damage equal to its mana value to any target, so you're really hoping to not hit lands. You don't get a whole lot of top deck manipulation in red and black, so that's going to be a bit more chaotic as to how much damage you can potentially do with it. Hidetsugu seems to be an aristocrat style red and black commander. He probably is better than 99 of someone else's build. I'm putting him solidly into B tier. Hinata Dawn Crowned, probably the most likely to be altered card in the entire set. For 1 blue, red, white, you get a flying trample Kirin Spirit, that's a 4/4. Spells you cast cost 1 less for each target, and spells your opponents cast cost 1 more for each target. This means Curse of Swine or Heliod's Intervention are essentially free for you, all while your opponent's things are taxed. So it's a very, very strong commander. It's in colors that are great for a red, white, and blue control build. I'm putting Hinata in A tier, close to S tier. It might be S tier once I see a few more builds of it where it's truly, truly broken. Next up, we have Ishin, 2 Heavens as 1. For red, white, black, you get a 3/4 Human Samurai, and essentially he just doubles all your attacking triggers. He's really good. You can do a lot of different build variety with him. You can either play more defensive with things like Circle of Flame, or you can have a bunch of attacking triggers with things like Sword of the Animist if you go Voltron. Ishin's going to be A tier. I've seen a lot of builds for him. Next up is Jin Gitaxis, Progress Tyrant, a 5/5 Phyrexian Praetor for 5 blue, with whenever you cast an artifact, instant, or sorcery, you copy that spell, and you may choose new targets for the copy. This ability only triggers once a turn, and whenever an opponent casts an artifact, instant, or sorcery spell, you counter it, and that ability triggers only once each turn. This guy's just amazing. He's going to be in a lot of control builds. He's going to be a staple in a lot of artifact builds as well. He's not great as a commander by himself just because 7 mana is very expensive. You're only in mono blue, but he's going to be seen in the 99 of a lot of builds. I'm going to put him in B tier because I'm sure you can build him to be super powerful by himself in mono blue, but you're honestly just better off doing Urza or something similar. Next up we have Junji, the Midnight Sky. This is the black spirit dragon, so it's a 5/5 for 3 black with flying and menace. When it dies, you can either have each opponent discard 2 cards and lose 2 life, or you can put a non-dragon creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield and lose 2 life. The idea where you can reanimate something when it dies is really, really cool. Honestly, a lot of the times you're going to be reanimating something like Gary with this guy. The discard ability is going to be used less, but I'm sure if you're running Tiny Bones or something similar, it'll do well. As far as Junji as a commander, I'm going to put this as a B tier, really because the idea of it just being a reanimator build where you can sacrifice and get back Junji over and over seems really powerful. Next up we have Kairi, the Swirling Sky, a 6/6 Dragon Spirit for 4 blue. It has flying and ward 3, and whenever it dies you get to choose one, just like all the other ones. You can either mill 6 cards and return up to 2 instants or sorceries from your graveyard to your hand, or you can return any number of target non-land permanents with a total mana value of 6 or less to their owner's hands. Now, that means you can bounce every token on the board, plus additional stuff, because tokens have a mana value of 0, so that's really, really powerful. powerful. This is not a great lead singer. This is going into the C tier. It's expensive, it doesn't have any inherent synergies, but is really good in the 99 of any other build where you want to either recycle instants and sorceries, or if you're using this as a semi-board wipe to shut down tokens. Kodama of the West Tree is next. It's a 3/3 for tuna green with reach. With modified, creatures you control have trample. Again, modified is equipment, auras, or counters on creatures make them modified. And whenever a modified creature you control deals damage to a player, search your library for basic land and put it on the battlefield tab. This is really, really good. This is going to be going into the 99 of a lot of builds that focus on +1/+1 counters. This might actually make Ayusa significantly more powerful just because of how easily you can modify your creatures in addition to ramping out. It's going to be okay as a commander on its own because it's mono green and cares about counters. It's probably best in the 99 of another build. This one is going to be B tier as well. Next up we have Katos, the Silent Spider. For 3 blue black, you get a 4/4 with, when it enters the battlefield, exile target card other than the basic land from an opponent's graveyard. Search that player's graveyard, hand, or library for any cards with the same name and exile those as well. Then that player's shuffle. For as long as you control Katos, you may play one of the exile cards and you may spend mana as though it was mana of any color. This does not do a whole lot in Commander. You're only going to ever hit one card that is in a graveyard and you'll be able to cast it. You do have to spend mana to cast it as well. Honestly, this does not seem great at all. It doesn't even have a ninjutsu ability. I'm going to put this in D tier. I'm sure someone is going to be milling and trying to get something cool off this, but the power level of this is just so low. Next up we have Kura, the Boundless Sky. This is the green dragon spirit, so it's a 4/4 for 3 green with flying and death touch. And when it dies, you can either search your library for 3 land cards and put them into your hand and shuffle, or create a XX green spirit token where X is the number of lands you control. So it either floats into a probably larger body, or you can get some lands out of this, which is really, really good. Flying and death touch means that it is an amazing blocker, so Kura is all around a great utility creature. As a lead singer in a commander deck, probably not that great. However, if you have an ability in mono green to reliably sacrifice it, you can probably do well with it. Kura is going to be going into my C tier list. Again, this is just more of a utility creature rather than the lead singer of any commander deck. Next up we have Kyodai, Soul of Kamigawa. This is a 3/3 dragon spirit for 3 and a white with flash and flying, and whenever it enters the battlefield, another target permanent gains indestructible for as long as you control Kyodai, and if you spend Wooburg, it gets +5/+5 until end of turn. So this is just a low budget 5-color commander for dragons. It gives another dragon indestructible, which does not synergize at all with the other dragon spirits because they all want to die. I would much have preferred it to sacrifice a dragon and then bring it back, maybe to get a trigger on one of their abilities. The ability to give it +5/+5 is essentially never going to be used. It's not a very good commander. It's going into my D tier. Next up we have Light Paws, Emperor's Voice, a 2/2 for 1 and a white. Whenever an aura enters the battlefield under your control, if you cast it, you search your library for an aura with mana value equal to or less than that aura with a different name. Then each aura you control and put that card onto the battlefield attached to Light Paws and shuffle. In Commander, this is just search for an aura that is the same or lesser mana value and put it onto Light Paws. It gets real big, real fast. Things like ethereal armor and all that glitters stack really well. You get to run indestructibility and just make Light Paws a huge, monstrous threat. However, it does take some setup, so Light Paws is vulnerable in their early turns, but it does come down fast, so hopefully you can dodge some of that removal. Light Paws is going into A tier. It is probably one of the best mono-white commanders I have seen in a very long time. Next up we have Naomi, Pillar of Order. She is a 4/4 human advisor for 3 white black. When she enters the battlefield or attacks, if you control an artifact and an enchantment, you get a 2/2 white samurai with vigilance. This is going straight into D tier. This is not good. Even if you can reliably trigger her ETB and attack trigger, you're just making a 2/2, and this is just really a confusing commander that doesn't do a whole lot. Requiring you to have an artifact and an enchantment is such a hoop to jump through. I'm not sure why you would. Naomi definitely deserves a D tier listing. Next up, of course, we have Nashi, Moon Sage's Scion for 1 black black. It's a rat ninja. That's a 3/2. It has ninjutsu for 3 and a black, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you exile the top card of each player's library. Until end of turn, you may play one of those cards, and you can spend life instead of mana to cast that card. So you get essentially 1 Bolas's Citadel trigger, but you get to do it from each player's library. It's a really cool sounding effect, but honestly, it's going to cost you a lot of life to get something good out. Nashi is 100% meant to go into the 99 of another ninja tribal build, so she is going to be solidly placed into the C tier. Norika Yamasaki the Poet is a 3/2 for 2 and a white with Vigilance, and whenever a samurai or warrior attacks alone, you can cast an enchantment from your graveyard that turn. This is the other Yamazaki. This is going in the same spot as the other Yamazaki. Again, we're just assuming that you're going to be running this as a red and white partner tribal build. If your table does not allow that, running Norika Yamazaki as a mono white commander is going to place her solidly into D tier though. Ryu Storm's Edge is a 3/3 human samurai with first strike for 2 red white. Whenever a samurai or warrior you control attacks alone, untap it. If it's the first combat phase, there's an additional combat phase. This is just going to be exalted tribal with samurai or warriors. You're going to have 1 big monstrous attacker, probably Ryu himself, and it makes a good Voltron build. It's going into my B tier because it's probably not going to be super powerful, and it's going to be very, very hard to reliably make him large enough to be a threat, but there's a lot of good exalted cards and will probably be a good build for that. Next up, we have Risona Asari Commander, a 3/3 with haste for 1 red white. When it deals combat damage to a player, if it doesn't have an indestructible counter on it, you put an indestructible counter on it, which is really good. Whenever a combat damage is dealt to you, you remove the indestructible counter. This automatically goes into my D tier. The ability to give itself an indestructible counter is really, really cool, and it makes it very powerful, but whenever you're dealt combat damage, you remove the counter from it. Essentially means that it won't ever have the counter for too long, especially in a multiplayer game. Otherwise, it's just a 3/3 with haste, which is not great for a commander. This is going solidly into my D tier. Next up, we have Satoru Umezawa, 1 blue-black for a 2/4 with each creature card in your hand has ninjutsu 2 blue-black. In addition to whenever you activate a ninjutsu ability, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 into your hand and the rest on the bottom of any order, and you can only do that once a turn. Satoru is stupidly powerful in blue and black. You can easily one-shot someone with a Blight Steel coming out as early as turn 4, and he's just a powerful commander. He's going solidly into my S tier. He is one of the best contenders for a blue and black commander in general. Next up, we have Satsuki, the Living Lore, a 1/3 human druid for green and white. You can tap and put a lore counter on each saga you control. You can only do that at sorcery speed, and when he dies, you can either return a saga or enchantment creature you control to its owner's hand, or return a saga from your graveyard to your hand. This is the Saga Commander, very powerful in a deck where you're just looking to play out a bunch of sagas, especially the ones that turn into creatures. I don't think there's enough in just green and white to justify the color limitation, which is why I'm putting him at B tier, but this card is only going to get better as more sagas are printed. Shigeki Jukai Visionary is a 1/3 legendary enchantment creature snake druid for 1 and a green with the ability to channel. This means you can discard it and return X target non-legendary cards from your graveyard to your hand. That channel is usually useless on a commander, but Shigeki has pay 1 and green and tap it, return it to its owner's hand, and reveal the top 4 cards of your library, and you can a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped and the rest into your graveyard, so it can reliably go back into your hand. And when you discard it with a channel ability, you can return X non-legendary cards from your graveyard to your hand. So it does have some inherent synergy, so it can do stuff itself, but it's a lot of mana to do not a whole lot. It's going to end up in my D tier as well, because jumping through that many hoops to get very minor card advantage is not what you want to be doing. Next up, we have Tameshi, Reality Architect for 2 and a blue. She's a 2/3 Moonfolk Wizard with whenever 1 or more non-creature permanents are returned to hand, draw a card, and it only triggers once a turn. You can pay X and white, return a land you control to its owner's hand, and return an artifact or enchantment with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. You can only do that as a sorcery. So she can reanimate artifacts and enchantments, which is very strong. In blue and white, you're going to be probably running a lot of Staxy effects, and in addition to drawing cards whenever you bounce something. I can see a good control build coming out of Tameshi, but the restrictions of only once per turn, as well as activating her second ability only as a sorcery, do hold her back quite a bit. Tetsunari, Toad Rider, is a 3/3 human ninja for 2 and a black. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, if you don't control a creature named Kemi, you create a Kemi, which is a 3/3 black and green frog token with whenever you cast an enchantment spell, each opponent loses 1 and you gain 1. You can also spend 1 and a hybrid Simic to have Tetsunari and a frog you control become unblockable this turn except by creatures with flying or reach. So essentially, you can have him and his frog hop over your opponents, which is really cool. A lot of the builds focus on making the Kemi token as fast as possible and trying to drain as much as you can. However, the ability is rather unique and there's not a whole lot of cards that synergize with it. I'm sure that there's something that will break this card eventually, but for now it's just going into my B tier. And last up, we have the Reality Chip, a legendary artifact creature equipment jellyfish for 1 and a blue, with the ability to look at the top card of your library at any time. It's a 0/4. It also has reconfigure, so you can attach it to a creature. If you do, it becomes an equipment and it stops being a creature. And as long as it's attached to a creature, you can play lands and cast spells from your top of your library. This is an amazing card. This easily lets you get a hexproof creature out, equip it, and then be able to access the top card of your library, including playing lands for the remainder of the game. This is a very powerful effect. It is in mono blue. However, with blue's library manipulation, you can easily find powerful and reliable synergies with this card. It might be better than 99 of another build, but the Reality Chip is going into A tier in my list. Alright nerds, that's it for every legendary creature in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty ranked. Let me know what you think of my placements down in the comments below, and let me know if you'd like to see videos similar to this one in the future. Thanks nerds.